Again, for all the Ukrainians watching, we don't like you. We don't, never have, never will. To the last Ukrainian is exactly what our policy is. Lindsey Graham, for once in his pathetic life, has been honest. And we will fight this to the last Ukrainian. We want you all to die. We don't care about you. Just all we ask is that before you die, you kill as many Russians as possible. We're going to give you these weapons. You're going to die, but just kill a bunch of Russians first, and then we're happy. And they've admitted this. How many times do I have to hear an American representative in Congress say, this is the best deal in the world for a fraction of our defense budget?
But you said something interesting. You said most of the money will actually never reach Ukraine, will never end up in the hands of Ukrainian. They will just get cycled back to United States. Are you talking about, is it because most of the money are going toward weapon purchases that's just going to the U.S. military industrial complex?
Yeah, we in previous aid to the Ukrainians, there's different ways that we give the Ukrainians. I mean, we can buy new weapons, or we can draw down our stockpiles and give those to Ukrainians. We've done both. We don't have any new weapons to buy, or we don't have the money to do that. And when we've drawn down to very dangerous levels. Again, just if we want to go to war against China, we need to have equipment, weapons, stuff. If we want to fight the Russians in Europe, we need to have equipment, weapons, stuff. Oh my God, if we ever had to go to war against Iran, we need to have equipment, weapons, stuff. And a lot of that's in storage, in reserve, waiting. And what we did is we said, okay, we're going to start handing that stuff out to the Ukrainians. And finally, the military went, whoa, we're getting very dangerously low on the stockpiles of the weapons we will need if we have to fight any of these other things. So they stopped. So what's happening now is we need the money to rebuild that. We gave that money away. We need the money to rebuild that. And so we allocate it. It's basically what we're doing is I mean, we're going to replace the goods, but it's sort of the Ukraine's got the raw end of the deal because you got the old stuff. Let me tell you how it works, Ukraine, just so you guys understand. We don't like you. I just want to reiterate that. We really don't like you because we don't give you the good stuff. It's like, me going and saying, I'm hungry. And someone says, Scott, I'm going to give you some delicious baked beans. You guys are the nicest people. I love baked beans. But they go to the back of the warehouse where they pull the can out and they go, expiration date, 1988. Yeah, we'll give Scott the 1988 expired baked beans. And I'm going, but guys, half of this stuff's rancid. If I eat it, I get food poisoning. But you said you wanted baked beans, boy. Here you go, 1988. We reach in the back and we give the Ukrainians all the expired javelins, all the expired artillery, all the crap. And it gets there, and some of this stuff doesn't work. I mean, I feel, again, I don't have too much sympathy for the Ukrainians, but I got a feel for a guy who's been given a weapon and expects it to work and pops up and goes, and it doesn't work. And now he's just exposed himself in a life and death situation under the anticipation that this weapon's going to work. And now he's going to die because we gave him bad stuff. I mean, that's pretty crappy of us, but we are a crappy nation. We're not friends. Again, for all the Ukrainians watching, we don't like you. We don't, never have, never will. To the last Ukrainian is exactly what our policy is. Lindsey Graham, for once in his pathetic life, has been honest. And we will fight this to the last Ukrainian. We want you all to die. We don't care about you. Just all we ask is that before you die, you kill as many Russians as possible. We're going to give you these weapons. You're going to die, but just kill a bunch of Russians first, and then we're happy. And they've admitted this. How many times do I have to hear an American representative in Congress say, this is the best deal in the world for a fraction of our defense budget? We're able to transfer lethal capability to the Ukrainians so they can kill Russians, and it doesn't cost us any manpower. That is the ultimate expression of moral depravity. But the Americans are saying this with pride, and the American people are letting them get away with it. That's what I don't understand. Why are we sitting there going, guys, that's perverse. That's sick. What kind of friend does that? How can you wave a Ukrainian flag claiming to be their friend when you literally just sentenced 200,000 Ukrainian men to death? This is just mind-boggling to me. Thank God for the Russians. I mean, I don't know. You heard that expression, take a chill pill? We use that a lot in America. I know my kids have used it with me. Dad, take a chill pill, especially when they watch me do podcasts like this. They're like, take a chill pill, calm down. The Russians have invented chill pill. I mean, Putin, he takes a chill pill every morning. Lavrov takes a chill pill. Shoigu. The Russians, you don't see them getting excited. The Russians are just like, okay, I understand. And we're just going to keep doing what we do.
I got a question. Scott. I mean, we talked about the money that's going in there. We talked about the billions and billions and billions going to what I used to use the term MIC for made in China, and now I call it military industrial complex. Now it used to be made in China, but now brand MIC is the military industrial complex. What does, let's say, 20 billion buy you if you're Alinsky and company? Does that buy you to November's election, or are we going to have a double Afghanistan issue here, where it's just going to be a massive embarrassment for the political elections here in November? I mean, my concern is that maybe they've undershot. Maybe they should have went for 100 billion if they wanted to, save face. I mean, are we going to see? Russia maybe understand that November is a deadline that could work in their favor if they go on the offensive here in the next little while?
Well, first of all, let me just start off by saying Russia doesn't understand calendars. Not in this war. They don't care. We all care about calendars. I mean, it's amazing how much we care about calendars, because we need the Russians to win this war when it's convenient for me. I'm going to Russia in June. I need the Russians to do something dramatic so that when I go to Russia in June, I have something to talk about that it increase my vibe. And the Russians go, yes, Scott, we'll do that, pal. We'll kill 40,000 Russian soldiers to accelerate our offensive operation just so you get to be convenienced. The Russians don't care about the calendar. They gave up the calendar a long time ago. They care about objectives, and they will adjust. They're right now doing a $20 billion adjustment going, what does that mean? And I believe the real answer is not much. I mean, it's like me having a sports car and hearing a little hiccup, and I open up the engine and I go, all I have to do is adjust that gap in my spark plug. I'm giving away my age because I don't even know if spark plugs have gaps anymore. I don't even know if they use spark plugs anymore. But I just know when I was a kid in Boy Scouts, I had to do my automotive merit badge, and my dad had to take me in and teach me how to do timing in a spark plug gap, and you had this little tool that you went in, you cleaned the carbon off and made sure the gap was right and all that. But the bottom line is you did that, you shut the engine, worked. You didn't have to do anything else. No carburetor change, no nothing. Things working. All this 20 billion did is a little hiccup in spark plug gap, and the Russians will go in and fix that, and the engine's going to work. This is nothing. This is a big nothing burger. What does it buy the Ukrainians? First of all, remember, Ukraine is in a horrible situation right now. A lot of the money that we're giving to the Ukrainians is for training and intelligence support and stuff like that. But they need literally 150,000 troops right now on the front line. They don't have them. They're having trouble recruiting them. But let's say they had them. You have to train them. The bare minimum training you need to be just functional on the battlefield is 3 months. Now, you can't train them in Ukraine because there's no air defense. So you bring them all together, the train facility, and boom, boom, boom. Mr. Kinzhal comes out, Mr. Iskander comes out, and it's very difficult to train when you're being blown up by Russian missiles. Training, you need to get good 8 hours sleep every night. You need to eat. You got to get physically fit. And then you have to go out and do this stuff and then come back in classrooms. And, it's 3 months of focused training to turn a raw recruit into somebody that can function on the battlefield. So it's going to have to happen outside of Ukraine, not inside Ukraine. That's logistics. But now imagine you thump somebody over the head, because that's the Ukrainian recruitment method, over the head in a van, and you're going to send him to Poland? So he gets off in Poland and he turns to the Polish instructors and said, I don't want to be here. I got thumped on the head. I'm declaring myself to be a refugee. The Poles will go, well, you can't. You're here under a military contract. Okay, but now this guy, do you think he's going to sit there? You're right, guys. I'm going to sit in class and just listen, and I'm going to obey. I'm going to become the best soldier in the world, even though I don't want. No, that's going to be the most disruptive. So my point is, you can't train somebody who doesn't want to be there. And so how do you train these people? No amount of money is going to solve this problem. The fact that nobody believes in the war anymore, and the Ukrainians are having a huge recruiting problem. But let's just say hypothetically you did that, so you train them up. Some of this 20 billion is going to go to equipping them. So now you bring in all that equipment. Now, are you going to? You're going to give them their uniforms and their guns and everything at the basic training, but what about the tanks and everything they're going to need? The artillery, the armored vehicle. They're going to fall in on this there, or are you going to ship that off to Ukraine and they're going to fall in? Either way, you got a problem, because you got a footprint of logistics that has to move with these people. And the Russians are sitting there with their satellites and their other capabilities going, we got them. And as they come in, see, there used to be umbrellas of Patriot air defense and NASAMS and all this stuff that complicated the Russian effort. So the Russians were trying to interdict this stuff, but they broke it up into 12 penny packets. The Russians could only interdict 5, 7 get to the front lines. That's, we built that in as we designed this thing. We said we expect the Russians to interdict so many percentages, so we're going to break it up into penny packets that can come in, be combined to have a combat effectiveness. We'll overload the system up front to get what we need, when the time for the battlefield. But that's assuming that all this protection exists. It's not there anymore. So as we break things up, what we're finding out is we send it in, bam, it's hit. Send it in, bam, it's hit. Let's break it up even smaller. Break it up, bam, it's hit, bam, it's hit, bam, it's hit, bam. The Russians are interdicting a whole lot more of this. So as they move it to the front line where it needs to be, it's already getting dissipated. By the time it gets to the front line, the Ukrainians have now found out that they can't gather everything together because the Russians hit it as well. There's no air defense. Well, Scott, isn't some of this Patriots? Some of it is. Where do you think the priority of Patriot coverage are going to go? Front line? No, they tried that. They tried the mobile Patriot packet where they put them in and the Russians killed all the Patriots. And suddenly the Ukrainians went, damn, we don't have any more Patriots left because our experiment failed. They're going to put it in Kiev to protect the capital. They're going to put it around airfields to protect F-16s when they come in. They're going to take it down and try and protect Odessa because that's our launching pad for strikes against Crimea. Okay, so you have that. But remember, they're trying to install it in Kiev, the airfields in Odessa, without existing air defense. So as they bring it in, the Russians will go, yeah, gotcha. And there's not enough air defense. I mean, this isn't even a case of, have 2 to get 1. You're going to need to have 3 or 4. So you're going to need 3 or 4 Patriot batteries ready to deploy to get 1 ready to operate. And then when that one's operating, the Russians still have shown that they know how to kill it. So the Russians will simply overwhelm the air defense yet again. There's a reason why there's no air defense in Ukraine. It's because the Russians killed it all. And the Russians have a tactic that causes Ukrainians to expend all of their missiles. So what? We're going to give them new batteries and new missiles. And you're telling me the Russians can't repeat the tactic that worked last time, but this time the Ukrainians are even weaker now as they try to prepare to counter the Russian tactics? Ukraine has no chance. There's no chance whatsoever. That's the reality of it. That's why this bill is a crime. And it doesn't matter, to be frank, how much money they poured into this. You could have doubled, tripled the amount of money you want to give Ukraine. All you did is make the Russian targeting problem a little bit more severe, but the Russians have the ability to target this. The Ukrainians can't stabilize the situation and then flip the script on the Russians. The situation will never be stabilized. The Russians will always maintain the momentum. And this war is over. It didn't solve anything. The Russians have said that they expect dramatic results on the battlefield by May, or a month out. And we're starting to see the fractures in the battlefield. And the Ukrainians don't have troops to plug it up. Even if the stuff comes in, the Ukrainians said it ain't going to get there for a couple of weeks, if not months. That means that the Russians, again, have carte blanche for that period of time to continue doing what they're doing. We get into May. What are the dramatic results? Probably a rupturing of the front lines, a move on the Dnieper. The Ukrainians have to make a precipitous retreat. Dramatic. Now, one thing that they did do, though, is give the Zelensky government the ability to pay off pensions and pay salaries. This creates sort of a political stability, which is to the benefit of Zelensky. So if the if the Russians are going to put the full press on the Ukrainians to get rid of Zelensky, there's a big thing coming up in May 20th. I think that's when the Russians are going to say that Zelensky's no longer the president of Ukraine because he didn't have an election, and that's when his term expires. And they'll say after that he's constitutionally not the. And then a lot of options open up then, because if he's not the president, is he protected? Can the Russians take him out? Who are the Russians going to negotiate with? The Russians can deny. My point is, this money might have bought Zelensky a little bit more time of viability, but they bleed through that money that quick. Plus, it's corrupt. You really think that all the money that was going to go to the pensioners is going to the pensioners, or is it going to go to Zelensky's retirement fund in Miami and fund a whole bunch of other people retiring? Because the panic's on right now in Ukraine, and now this money came in, and they're going, "Thank you, you guys bought us our ticket out of here." And the corruption is unreal. The political collapse of Ukraine might have been staved off a little bit, but I still think you're looking by the end of this summer. There's just no way that Zelensky can stay in. And here's the big question: when they burn through this money, and they will burn through this money very quickly, is the United States ready to do this all over again? Do you remember, if you think about the political climate of trying to get 60 billion pushed through, imagine having just done this and then now come up in August, right before the election season, and Ukrainians go, "We need more, baby. We need more. Mama needs a new pair of shoes. You got to feed the baby." And the American people are going to go, "What? We just gave you all this money. You want more? Welcome to the bottomless pit, the money pit called Ukraine." And so this is a disaster for Ukraine. There's no calendar that's going to save them.
Yeah, I was reading earlier this week, if you took all the funding from the European Union, Collective West, the United States, everybody out of the Ukraine economy, it would be approximately doing 16% of what it used to do before the conflict started. So, in fact, their GDP is 84% fiction, if you can even call it a GDP. I got an interesting scenario, and I want both you guys to think about this for a moment here. When Russia, takes territory and it advances, it takes these small towns or even small little cities in Ukraine. And I asked Patrick Lancaster this question the other day. Think about it for a moment, Carl and Scott. If there is a major push forward and Russia starts to take territories by, I guess, the kilometers over a few weeks period, what happens to the communication lines? For example, one person could wake up and the next morning they wake up, Russia could have taken that territory, and now the cellular phone networks and internet networks and water and electricity would instantly be shut off by Ukraine. Is that a possibility that Russia can take territory and then turn those services back on? I know it's a bizarre question, but I would like to get an answer on how this shift of territory losses goes. And let's say it goes in the favor of Russia. If they advance 5 kilometers or 6 kilometers over a couple of weeks period, or maybe a week's period, what happens to all that infrastructure and who controls it after? And to me, is it just scorched earth, dead earth, because they've been fighting? It's an interesting question. It's been boggling my mind, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it.
Well, we know the answer. It's not a hypothetical. It's a real thing. First of all, most of the fighting that's taking place is on Russian territory. Now, the Ukrainians dispute that, but fighting in Kherson, fighting in Zaporizhia, fighting in Donetsk. Even some fighting in Lugansk. These are the Russians fighting to evict Ukrainians from what the Russians believe is legally Russian territory. So the Russians have a plan. That village that the Ukrainians are occupying is a Russian village. And the Russians haven't written that village off. In fact, the Russians have a plan that when they take over that village, they already have a plan, and they have money budgeted how to extend gas lines in, how to extend services in, how do we make life livable again? Once it's been demined, once it's been deemed safe, once you push the Ukrainians back, how to repopulate this and make this a viable city. The Russians have a plan. The Russians aren't writing off Russian territory. All of Zaporizhia, all of Kherson, all of Donetsk will become part of Russia and will be absorbed into Russia. And brought up to the standards of living that Russia enjoys, which is a good standard of living, by the way. So they already have a plan. We see that in Bakhmut. We see that in Avdiivka, that already the Russians have come in, start the process rebuilding. Mariupol stands as a shining example of how Russia, takes responsibility for reconstruction. Now, but we also know, for instance, when the Russians moved into Kherson and Zaporizhia before it was Russia, back when it was occupied Ukraine, before the Russians had done the referendum, while the Russian government was actively negotiating with Ukrainians for the return of Kherson and Zaporizhia as part of a settlement. Even then, because the Russians are actually, not bad people. And so they came in and they took responsibility for the territory. They said, we occupied this place. If the Ukrainians turn off the lights, we have to turn on the lights. If the Ukrainians turn off the gas, we have to turn on the gas. We come in, we pave the roads. Education. I mean, the Russians went in and said, well, we're now occupying the Kharkov district, and we've got a whole bunch of civilians here who have kids who need to go to school. And so, they're now in the Russian school system. They took the teachers off for a training session on how to, teach the Russian curriculum, brought the teachers back. They started the school. Then the Ukrainians counterattacked, captured this thing, took every single one of these teachers that went off and got a Russian education and executed them. That's the Ukrainians. These are the scum of the earth. But the Russians were sitting there saying, we got to have the schools open up. The schools have to operate under the Russian system because that's what it is. And they were trying to do the right thing. The Russians have a plan for everything. And if the Russians take territory, they own that territory, at least in terms of responsibility. What Russia will give back to a post-war conflict Ukraine, I don't know. That has yet to be determined. But what we can say for certain is that Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk will be Russia in totality, just like Crimea is, and that the Russians look at Crimea. The Russians, took over Crimea in 2014. Crimea was run down after 24 years of Ukrainian misrule. 24 years. The Russians have been working to rebuild it ever since, get everything up to speed. There was a little village of Batelny where a good friend of mine, Alexander Ziryanov, my host when I go to Russia, that's where he was born and raised. And his next door neighbors were a Crimean Tatar family. And when I first visited them in May of last year, they were like, all this wonderful construction. They have the great highway being built that connects the Crimea Bridge with Sevastopol and all this right there on the horizon. Modern construction. They're like, well, it's nice to see all this Russian construction taking place and all this stuff happening, but the villages are sort of getting the short shrift. We're not getting any of that rehabilitation money. And they had problems. They didn't have gas. They had to use electricity, which is very expensive compared to gas. They didn't have sewage lines, even though a water line was right there. They had to get their own water. But when I went back in January and visited Fatima's family, the Crimean Tatar family, the gas lines were up. The Russians had come in and started laying out the gas lines. Right now, I'm pretty sure that they're all connected to gas, and they're also talking about bringing sewage in. It takes time. After 24 years of misrule, it takes time. Russia's at war with Ukraine. You'd think their number one priority is to produce weapons and all this stuff. But while that's all happening, the Russians are still spending money to improve the infrastructure, the life of the people of Russia. It wasn't about bringing Batelny up to where it was under the Ukrainians. That's not the Russian standard. It's not to say, let's get you to where the Ukrainians had you. It's let's get you to where Russians should be. And when I say Russians should be, understand I'm talking about a Crimean Tatar family, whom, if you listen to Ukrainians, are the most oppressed people on the planet. But here you are in Crimea, a Crimean Tatar village is being brought the gas, being brought the the various utilities that modern life requires. And I guarantee if I go back there in a year and a half, the roads will be paved. They've already rebuilt the schools. They've rebuilt building. Everything that crumbled under the Ukrainians is being rebuilt while Russia's at war. Now you know what Russia's going to do when they capture villages and towns in Ukraine. Once the fighting is pushed away, Russia will invest the necessary resources needed to get these places up so that they're livable. And if they're going to be part of Russia, to bring them up to Russian standards, full Russian standards, which, contrary to what the Western media says, are actually pretty good living standards.
So why is Ukrainian political class, the political elite, are not working toward a peace settlement? I mean, that we know Boris Johnson put a stop to the Istanbul negotiations when, at that time, back in March 2022, Ukraine was already ready to sit down with Russians to work out a deal. But Boris Johnson came in and said, "Don't call it off. We'll support you 100%." What Zelensky is hoping to get out of this by prolonging the conflict? I mean, wouldn't the Ukrainian political establishment, couldn't they see that there's no future in continuing this conflict for the Ukrainian nation? I mean, why wouldn't they just say, okay, well, like, this is hopeless. We'll just come to a peace settlement with Russia right now on even on Russia's terms?
Well, I mean, the working assumption in what you just said is that the Ukrainian political establishment cares about the Ukrainian nation, and they don't. They care about themselves. There's a reason why we call Ukraine the most corrupt nation in Europe, because it is the most corrupt nation in Europe. And the oligarch class, which funded the political class, it's interesting. I don't know how many people have seen it. And for all the people out there tuning in, take the time, because it's actually a very interesting program, A Servant of the People. It was Zelensky's TV series that helped propel him to become president of Ukraine. And when you look at the first part of the series, you see these oligarchs, these old fat men meeting in a banya, plotting the how they're going to control Ukraine, who they're going to bring in, how they're going to do this, that, and the other thing. That's the reality of Ukraine. It's not about the will of the people or anything. It's about oligarchs controlling the environment so they make money. It's one giant grift. Ukraine has been one giant grift from the moment of its independence of the Soviet Union up until today. It's been, Burisma, this energy holding company, is just a money laundering facility. And we talk about the Bidens, but we should talk about everybody else that goes through there. I'm not going to dox the poor woman, but there's a former, assistant secretary of defense who speaks often about this, but she needs to explain the fact that there's a photograph of her at in Ukraine wearing a Burisma jacket. It's like, really? Burisma's bought everybody. It's a vehicle for funding campaigns. It's a vehicle for funding covert intelligence. It's just this giant money laundering operation that Biden happened to latch into by putting Hunter Biden there, and then 10% to the big man and the whole thing. But the point is, Ukraine is just corrupt. So you can't sit there and say there's a political class that cares about the Ukrainian people. The political class that cared about at least part of the Ukrainian people were the pro-Russian parties that were thrown out after the Maidan coup of 2014. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there was no corruption. First of all, if you're a politician, whether you're a Russian, Ukrainian politician in Ukraine, you can't be a politician unless you somewhat play the game. And so even if you're playing the game just to survive, you're still, plugged in doing stuff. But there's really bad people and there's good. And if you take a look at the Russian politicians, they were actually trying to play the game to improve the lot of the Russian people in Ukraine. At least their motives were pure in whatever corruption they were involved in. But for the Ukrainian power elite, no, this is just about how to make money, how to grift. They've never cared about the Ukrainian people from day one. If they did care, they wouldn't have. But Zelensky, remember, he ran on a platform where he said, I will crawl on my knees to Putin and beg him not to go to war with Ukraine. Why didn't you? Well, because that wasn't his job. His job was to say that to get elected. Then once he got elected, his job was to do exactly what he's doing right now. A lot of people don't realize, they talk, you hear all these people talk about the European Union. In 2013, Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, said that Viktor Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president, said that he wanted to join the European Union. And the Russians said, yes, we will allow you to. But the Russians never really meant that. No, Russia did. Ukraine's a sovereign state. And Russia's like, you want to join the European Union? We can't stop you. your sovereign state. But here's the problem, Ukraine. Since 1991, when you became an independent state, we've had this wonderful economic relationship with you that's sort of underwritten your economy. And we have this free energy deal where we pay you a lot of money because pipelines send energy to Europe. And so, now you've suddenly inherited a multi-billion-dollar grift. And the Ukrainians are like, money, 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 money. That's how they create Burisma and other things to launder this money. And the Russians are like, and we give you a good deal. You can take your goods and bring them into Russia tax-free, duty-free. We got this wonderful economic relationship going on here. You want to join the European Union, all of that shuts down. We have to treat you now as we would any member of Europe, which means there's going to be tariffs, there's going to be structure, things are going to happen. And Yanukovych went, but my economy will collapse. And the Russians are like, hey, free will, Bubby. You want to join EU? You work it out with the EU. If your economy is going to collapse, put a number on it, give it to the EU and say, if you want us to join, you have to pay us this much money to compensate for the losses. And the European Union went, we ain't doing that, because the European Union, never wanted Ukraine to be a real member. All the European Union wanted is Ukraine to become a market for European Union goods, to do what they always do, lure people in with the promise of membership, knowing they don't qualify, knowing they never will qualify, but knowing they have a market there for European Union goods. So you, like any good colonial power, you now create a master-servant relationship with the Ukrainians. That's all the EU wanted. And for all the Georgians out there who are out there demonstrating against the Foreign Agent Registration Act, that's all the EU wants with you too. They want you to be a market for the EU. They don't want you to be a member. You'll never be a member. You don't qualify. You never will qualify. The Russians, however, have a nice little economic relationship with you that they could expand on and sustain, but you don't want it because you want the cocaine offered by the European Union. Well, Ukraine got hooked on that cocaine, and look where it has them right now. So no, this notion of Ukraine being this viable economy, the Ukrainian politicians caring for the Ukrainian people, they never have. It's just been one giant grift. And so the people in power right now aren't looking at this. This is the sad thing. They're willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands more Ukrainian lives for short-term financial gain, because in the end, they'll all flee. They have already bought their homes in Miami. They've already bought their homes in France, in London. They've stashed their money in bank accounts. Life will be good for them and their kids. Their kids aren't fighting on the front line. Their kids are out partying in Dubai and partying in Paris and partying in London and partying in Miami, partying in New York. So let's not pretend for a moment that there's a political class in Ukraine that gives one damn about the Ukrainian people. They don't at all.
I'm going to bring up this story here. Well, we got you on this, everybody on the screen here, where Scott was talking about money laundering and lots of cash going places. I don't know if you viewers know that I lived in Monaco for about 20 years. It is a tax haven in the south of France that has a population of about 35,000 people. Only 6,000 are original Monegasque residents, and the other 29 to 30,000 are permanent residents with residence cards. How you get a residence card in Monaco is very simple. It doesn't go through an immigration policy. It goes through a bank. A bank will write your attestation, which will give you the right to abode or right to live in Monaco. And usually back when I was about 20 years ago, anywhere from 1 million to 5 million would get you that signature. We fast forward to 2024. Latest buddies I've been talking to there, it's between 5 to 10 million. Now, if you watch this story here, it's very clear. Ukrainian oligarchs' secret escape to the French Riviera. And since the invasion of their country, dozens of wealthy Ukrainian families have fled to villas in the south of France. And I'll tell you why it's villas in the south of France first. And then it says these illegal departures of men for fighting age have earned them nicknamed the Monaco Battalion. Now, it's interesting how they've made it sound like these are victims. First of all, the game in town, if you live in Monaco, is to own an apartment, which should set you back anywhere from 3 to 5 million for a studio. Once you've purchased that studio, then you usually buy a villa in the hills, probably 5 to 10 minutes outside of Monaco, and that should set you back probably about $10 to $15 million as well. What is interesting is most of these homes that were owned by Russians were seized by the French government, and some of them were put on the auction block. And, well, lo and behold, they were purchased by offshore companies that were either in Belize or the Cayman Islands or the Turks and Caicos, and then money wired through there and back around. So my whole point of this is if you want to see in broad daylight where the U.S. tax dollars are going, all you have to do is get a plane ticket to the south of France, a quick ride from the Nice airport into Monaco. You will see the blue and yellow license plates on the Ferraris, the Bentleys, and there is not one care in the world. They don't give a damn. Now, who exposed this was a reporter in Ukraine. He actually mentioned this to the authorities that this was going on. And after that was mentioned, 2 months, the reporter was actually arrested. Go figure on that one. You guys can take over